This video I'm going to liberate even more of Altis, only using AI. I'm not going to get a single kill, or even fire a single bullet. Utilising Antistasi Ultimate's commander features to build and control squads of infantries, MG cars, APCs, and eventually tanks. Calling in airstrikes and utilising artillery to bomb our enemies into dust until we've liberated our homeland. Now, before we begin, let me catch you up on what's happened so far. Our liberation of Altis began with the liberation of the towns of Panochori and Neri. From there we captured resources, factories and outposts. Performing 2 insurgencies deep within enemy territory, we secured resources and towns in the northeast and the northwest of the island. Finally coming back to our own territory, slowly expanding until we had secured our first airbase. Now with the ability to launch airstrikes, our liberation of Altis will continue, with 3 goals in mind. Expand north past the airbase to have a buffer between our land and NATO-occupied territory, before setting our sights on KAVALA, the seaport, factory and outpost in the town. Finally, with KAVALA captured, having encircled the last few outposts and military base in this area, we would move north, setting up a bunch of AA and AT emplacements before blitzing our way back south through enemy territory. With our objectives in mind, I recruited and split 10 infantry teams into 2 groups with 20 units each. I sent both groups to different sides of the factory to have 2 angles of attack. Issuing them orders to move into position, the attack on the factory began and ended quite quickly. With only like 10 units on guard, our forces GL struck them before moving in. NATO responded to this attack by sending an APC to help repel it, but luckily we had set up AA defences around the airbase, and these guys eliminated that APC in no time at all. As I watched that APC getting eliminated, our forces had now moved into the factory, taking on the last of the guards. Now that we had the factory secured, our sights set on the next target, so I tasked them with moving on the outpost just north of the airbase. Capturing the factory, NATO sent a heli and paratroopers who landed deep within our territory between 2 emplacements, and they eliminated them in no time at all. The heli landed right on top of our forces, so a battle erupted, but our forces prevailed, destroying the heli and the infantry within. Setting our sights back on the outpost, I wanted to utilise the newfound power our airbase offered by launching a cluster bomb airstrike, which was quite effective. Our forces continued to slowly advance and eventually made contact with the last few squads patrolling around the perimeter of the outpost. Once again, I split my forces into 2 groups to attack the outpost from different sides. The fighting didn't last long as our forces outnumbered the enemy and quickly eliminated the guard before refocusing them on another squad that had engaged the rest of our forces. The attack continued as our forces utilised every resource I had provided them to eliminate the enemy forces and move in to secure the outpost. Once again, NATO sent a counterattack, so I decided to take a page out of my own book and use a spike launcher once again. Setting it up on a ridge ready to eliminate the APC or tank sent our way as soon as it came into range. With the APC NATO sent in their counterattack now dealt with, I grabbed the spike launcher and the AA missile launcher, putting them back into the garage, before issuing orders for the remaining squads to move on the next outpost. My forces were now on the move, and as they closed in on the outpost, I issued new orders, providing a path for them to follow. With my forces closing in, I wanted to begin the attack by bombing the outpost with mortars. With my mortar team currently in the airbase, I began bombing different positions in the outpost where I thought most of the forces would be. The first target was this structure on the map, which I was assuming was the tower with the 3 MG guns. Watching the bombs rain hell upon the enemy forces is quite pleasing, to be honest. Watching the devastation a mortar strike can bring upon enemy forces and the crumbling buildings falling all around. Our forces were taking quite a long time to advance, and I began to hear sounds of gunfire off in the distance. Checking in on them, there was now a marker on the map, which meant they had made contact with a roadblock. But it didn't take them too long to finish it off, as we outnumbered the enemy forces probably about 8-1. And now with decent armor, weapons, and even rockets, we trampled the roadblock, and my forces were back on the move to the outpost in no time. At the same time as our forces were back on the move, I continued to bomb the outpost. We had now lost some forces in the initial attack, but I like to look at this as an opportunity more than a loss. Now we could recruit and reinforce our attack with a QRF consisting of 2 MG cars, so issuing orders for 1 Humvee and 1 XM312, both with mounted MGs, to move on the outpost. Our attack continued. Well, after a little incident. Continuing to bomb the outpost, our infantry was closing in. At the same time, the QRF was moving. But in a moment, as I watched their advance, my vision blurred like I had just taken damage. But I was in our HQ, and with multiple AA and AT emplacements around, this was the moment I realized, do not have a mortar team near your HQ. At the same time as enemy mortars were raining down hell on our HQ, our QRF began to fight the enemy forces in the outpost, as our infantry continued to advance. At this point, it was just a waiting game, with most of the enemy forces already eliminated between our infantry advance, our mortar strikes, and our QRF. There were only a few enemies left alive. Eventually, our forces eliminated the last NATO units in the outpost, securing it and allowing me to come in and capture it. With a buffer of territory between the airbase and NATO-occupied territory, our sights set back on KAVALA, one of the most difficult towns to take, with 2 outposts, a factory and a seaport all within close proximity to the town. We relocated our HQ to the nearby town of Neri. Fast travelling with Pietros, I settled on setting up the new HQ behind this building. Preparing some defences like this AA emplacement, our first goal was to take the outpost just on the outskirts of town. But before launching our attack, I wanted to make sure we could afford such a large and potentially costly attack on KAVALA, so I went AFK for a while to build up money and HR. With a bunch of extra funds now built up, we were ready for the attack on KAVALA. Beginning by recruiting a bunch of infantry, 6 squads of 8 units each, and splitting them into 3 groups to attack from multiple angles, I sent our forces to their staging points. In the meantime they were on the move, I also recruited a mortar team. This time learning from the earlier close call and moving him just outside the town of Neri, away from our HQ. With most of our forces in position ready to attack, we began. I wanted to mortar strike the perimeter of the base before the tower itself, so to begin I sent a mortar barrage along the road leading to the base. As our mortar began, I issued orders to our forces to move up, and at the same moment they made contact with the enemy, our mortars began to strike. Most of our forces were engaging the infantry deployed in the outpost from different angles, and slowly we began to overpower them. Our left flank made quick work of the perimeter guard, so launching another mortar barrage and recruiting 2 MG cars, our forces continued to overpower the outpost guard and advance. Quite quickly, our MG cars were engaging and eliminating the last of the enemy forces, allowing me to come in and capture the outpost. NATO sent a counterattack to retake the outpost, but we eliminated that quite quickly. After eliminating the infantry dropped off from the counterattack, our sights set back on the factory and the seaport in the town of KAVALA. Setting our new objective for the infantry, they began moving towards the factory. At the same time, I recruited another mortar team, as our first one had somehow died. Moving them to another position just outside of the town of Neri again, we began to bomb the seaport just across the harbour from the factory. At the same time, I recruited and sent in reinforcements to assist in the taking of the town, factory and seaport. In the same moment as our mortars began to strike the seaport, I also sent in an airstrike to help eliminate most of the defence. Our infantry quickly advanced on the factory and were able to overrun the enemy forces and secure it in no time at all. During this, the mortars began to hit the seaport, and our airstrike also causing devastating effect, eliminating a majority of the infantry defending the seaport. As I captured the factory, I issued orders for my forces to move on the seaport and secured it too. NATO attempted to send a counterattack, but to very little effect. I grabbed one of these spike launchers and obliterated a tank they sent our way. Surprisingly, our first missile didn't eliminate it, but luckily the enemy AI don't seem to see our own AI very well, so this plays to our advantage. A helicopter was also sent, but we eliminated that too. Slowly, while I was doing all this, our forces advanced through the town and secured the seaport, allowing me to capture that too. With most of the town now secure, I wanted to move my HQ into the city of KAVALA itself. Fast travelling to the factory we had just captured and setting up in a random building in the town, we began to prepare our attack on the outpost. Recruiting a couple of squads of infantry and a mortar team who I immediately ordered to begin bombing the outpost. At the same time as I sent in a cluster bomb airstrike, we eliminated a bunch of the defences, the towers overlooking KAVALA itself, and some other MG emplacements. Not too long after this, our forces made their way into the outpost and began to engage and eliminate the last of the ground forces defending the outpost, allowing me to come in to secure it for ourselves. With this, I knew NATO would send a counterattack, so preparing with a unit with a spike launcher, we awaited the counterattack. NATO sent a tank our way, and was making its way through the streets of KAVALA when the attack came. This played into NATO's hands, preventing our spike from actually getting a clear shot and taking out the tank. I died a few times trying to place another AT spike launcher down and getting a unit onto it, but luckily, as this outpost was in such a difficult location for the tank to get to, the AI, I think, couldn't exactly find a path and ended up giving up and returning to base. I had eliminated all the ground forces the tank deployed, so it was on its own.
Clear.
With KAVALA now secure, I relocated my HQ back to the mountain north of Core, where the arms dealer was located. before launching an attack on the outpost in the town of Core itself. Our infantry slowly advanced, fighting their way through the town against the infantry defending it. I sent in a cluster bomb airstrike, which was effective. Our forces continued to advance and were now pushing through the town of Core, so I got this Hilux with a BMP and sent it in too. This guy arrived as our forces were securing the outpost, eliminating the last of the infantry. So I tasked my forces with engaging and liberating a nearby factory. Our forces were in the heat of battle when NATO sent a counterattack, which I only saw the destruction of. Luckily, this wasn't the only attack they sent our way. They sent another counterattacking force, like this APC.
I've got him! Contact! Soldier! Contact! Soldier!
Contact! Machine gunner!
Contact! AT soldier!
Contact! Soldier!
He's down! Target's down! Target!
And this attack chopper. With that, I was able to capture the factory and the outpost, and so our sights set on the radio tower on Magos Hill. Ordering our initial attack force to move up the hill, I began mortar striking the outpost from afar. Our initial attacking forces had advanced and a lot of them were eliminated, so I recruited a few more infantry squads and gave them orders to advance too.
Ten uzbrojony pojazd. KM.
With a lot of the defense now eliminated, our units continued to advance and even engaged this APC, eliminating it and securing the outpost. At this point, I went AFK for a good while to build up some more money, which I used to improve my AI skill level, getting them to level 20 out of 40. I spent the next little while working to capture the last few factories and outposts in this area before setting my sights on the military base.
Lewo. Przejdź na współrzędny 0, 4, 2, 1, 5, 0.
Capturing our first military base would finally allow us to purchase tanks and other armoured vehicles from the arms dealer. I had also set up some AT emplacements, as usually military bases are defended by some fairly advanced armour, and honestly it was a good thing that I did, as not too long after placing one down on the top of Magos Hill, it found a target. Now, while my forces were working to eliminate all the enemy forces in the outpost and factories I mentioned earlier, I began mortar striking the military base, hoping to eliminate as much of the enemy defences as possible. This triggered NATO to send a QRF to take out the mortar team, but we were ready for them. Now, it turns out there was also a tank in the military base, which might have turned the fight for the worse, but luckily it began to advance and we were able to take it out too.
12 o'clock. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that APC. 700 meters. 12 o'clock. Target that.
This allowed our forces to move up, and we had secured the military base in no time at all.
Cel zdjęty!
Finally, the last target in the area to secure all the southwest was this outpost. Beginning, as usual, mortar striking it, I sent in an APC and a few squads of infantry, and we secured it in no time at all.
W gotowości.
Rifleman, 300 meters, north.
With all of the southwest of Altis now secure, we wanted to move on the AFRF, who were beginning to be bold, expanding aggressively in the northeast. So, in the next video, we will set our sights on the AFRF and forcing them from Altis. That's it for the next video, and that's all for now. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment down below if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll chat to you all in the next one.